What is up, everybody? This is Gazbot coming at you with another art demo. This one's a little different, though. The subject here is a gentleman named James Randi, more commonly known as the Amazing Randi. And he is an older gentleman who, at the time of this recording, I believe is 89 or 90. This is 2018. And he is famous for two things. One, for being a magician, hence the Amazing Randi. And that was sort of the first half of his life, first half of his career, possibly longer. And he's also known for being a scientific skeptic, and he debunks false paranormal claims and people who sell, snake oil and steal people's money, claiming to be psychics and things like that. So, what's interesting is, well, I'll talk more about him in a second, but if you notice what I'm doing, I grabbed a bunch of reference photos and did a bunch of quick sketches of him. Um, Normally, I would take one of these sketches to a little bit more completion, and that would be like a 15-minute sketch or whatever. But this is 3 hours of drawing you're looking at, and this is the process. And this is why I get annoyed when people talk about talent, because there's skill and there's practice that gets that skill. And I struggle. You'll see I have trouble once I get to the final drawing. I redraw parts of it millions of times. But the idea I had with this was to take a bunch of different reference photos, mostly from his older age. There are lots of pictures of him from earlier in life, but this is the age he is now and the age I found most interesting to draw. And so I did a bunch of different photos where I just did quick sketches. Then I actually take one later, you'll see, and I trace it. And then at the end of everything, I do my one final piece of art, finished art. So this is 3 hours total. The final piece of art, arguably, I don't know, I didn't time it. Let's say it was an hour or whatever, but then there's 2 hours leading into it. So anyway, as you watch me do this, why did I choose James Randi? Well, as I said, he's an interesting person, and he's performed all kinds of amazing feats of illusion, as well as done public service for people, debunking frauds and things like that. And there's a movie out, a documentary. It's on Netflix, or at least it was, called An Honest Liar, and that refers to him because he's a liar, because he's a magician, but he never tries to trick people out of their money, and he tells you, he's going to trick you, and he never pretends he has magical powers or knows anything other people don't. Although he did have the opportunity to early on in his career. He did some mentalism and realized that you can make a lot of money with that, but you'd have to be willing to lie to people and tell them that you could talk to their dead relatives and stuff. And being a person of moral character, he decided not to do that and instead continued doing more honest magic, like escape art, acts and sleight of hand, as well as exposing people who that don't admit that they're doing trickery and pretend they have magical powers in order to steal money from people. So anyway, I saw this. I know a lot about him now, but I only have known about him since I saw this documentary. That was the first time I've heard of him. Since then, I've watched just about everything you can find on YouTube, from old bits he did on TV shows in the 60s and 70s, all the way up to speeches he gave like a year or two ago at various conventions. And he's a very fascinating individual, whether you like him or hate him, although I find it hard to believe anybody could hate him. But the movie is great to watch. An Honest Liar, I definitely recommend it. And I've been wanting to draw a picture of him for a while. But here's the thing. I am not very good at likenesses, which is funny because I, for years worked as a full-time caricature artist, and I still do it on the side from time to time. When I do in studio illustration style stuff, I do okay. And when I do parties, I do okay. I mean, I'm good enough. I'm a good enough artist that I get paid. People don't complain. But I know other character artists. I know other likeness artists, and I know I don't have their skill level or ability or eye for it, or however you want to describe it. And while it's not a major aspiration of mine to become someone that's good at likenesses, this one right here, I tried to do my character style. The others, I was doing sort of like rough sketches. This one, I put on 100% opacity with a thick pen and tried to just pretend I couldn't erase, and I was like at a party drawing him, and I wasn't particularly thrilled with the results. And I think I did erase one time. Yeah, right there. That was the one erase I did. But this was like if he sat in front of me and I had to do it. Now, it's not exactly accurate because I have a marker that has nice control and paper. And so this is gave myself a little bit of a handicap. But again, I was just trying to do all these different styles, which gets back to what I was saying. It's not a specific ambition of mine to become an amazing likeness, renderer. That's a weird way of saying it. But I do, however, want to improve a little bit, mainly not even for my caricature skills, like which is again part of my income, but obviously I do well enough that if I never improved again, I still get work. But every now and then, while I mostly do fictional characters and I like drawing monsters and robots, I find someone in real life that I'd like to draw, and I find it extremely difficult. And this is a person who I've felt like drawing ever since I saw that movie like 2 years ago, and I just found it very difficult to do. I could do a quick little sketch, but to take it to anything final and still have it kind of look like the person it's supposed to, I've had a difficult time. So I was gonna do that today. I was just gonna do a quick head sketch, and then I said, you know what? I haven't done any real studying or any real like homework in a while, so that's what I set out to do. I grabbed all the reference like I normally would, but instead of picking one, I sketched most of them. And then I did the one in the caricature style, quote unquote. And then here, I'm literally tracing. I'm inking it, like, and when I get done, it comes out with like a nice looking piece of, comic book style art. But, I didn't draw it. I inked it. And is this cheating? If I was trying to pass it off as an original piece of art, I do think it's cheating. And there are some artists that'll do literally this and then sell it as though it's their own work. And while there is a certain amount of skill and a certain amount of creative choices that go into it, I saw this more as practice. Now, if I had to get this done for a client and it was due the next day, maybe, yeah, maybe I would do it because there's a deadline. But there you can see 50 minutes total at this point. At some point, I stopped counting. Um, but I prefer not to do this, and I do think it's cheating a little bit. But it's a good, exercise and a good learning tool. So I did it as just to kind of, again, practice the likeness, practice the anatomy. And honestly, this drawing comes out, I prefer it to my final drawing, but my final drawing I'm more proud of because it's a more authentic representation of my ability and my skill and the likeness I'm capable of getting without tracing. That's interesting. I mean, I obviously don't know this person personally, but from everything I've seen, he seems to be a nice fellow, a pleasant fellow, except when dealing with people that are trying to defraud other people, then he could be a little bit abrupt and a little bit rude, but understandably so. But he is a pleasant fellow, a jovial fellow, good sense of humor, but this image makes him look very intense. And his younger pictures, he looks a little bit more approachable and a little bit more friendly. But I feel like as he's gotten older, his old man eyebrows have gotten crazier and his beard has gotten longer and he's, wears a cape around. And I think it's kind of cool because it's a good juxtaposition because he is a conjurer, as he would say. He is a magician. And so it fits that sort of persona. And it also gives him sort of a wizardy look, like Gandalf kind of wizard as opposed to the magicians we have in the world today. And it makes him look sort of sinister, but again, I know that he is not. I know that he's a benevolent force for good in the world, but it definitely makes me feel like he's some sort of, again, like I keep coming back to wizard, but like a different sort of wizard, a wizard that could use his powers in the world to defeat other evil wizards, through science and through ethics and morality and honesty. And I know I'm putting him on a bit of a pedestal, and I'm sure there are things about him that are not perfect, just like everyone. But the movie made a big impression on me, and everything I've seen on him since continued that good impression. One thing you'll notice here that I'm doing, which I do a lot with characters, well, he's a person, but characters are people that have glasses, is I draw the face first and then the glasses second, which I recommend as a good technique to make sure you have the facial features correct, because if someone has a beard or glasses or things like that, it makes it a lot easier to make it look like them. Doesn't mean it'll actually really look like them, but it makes them more identifiable. When I do characters at a party, somebody sits down, they have a baseball hat, a goatee, glasses, and an earring. I'm like, awesome. Even if I totally don't make it look like them, even if I mess up the drawing completely. If they have a hat, a goatee, glasses, and an earring, everyone will go, hey, that's Jimmy. So in order to try to actually get it to look more authentic and not just recognizable, drawing the face without the glasses and stuff first is a good habit to get into, I believe. And here I just opaque the lenses a little bit. I didn't actually go color. So you can see I'm pretty happy with that. Honestly, more than even the likeness, I was pretty happy with the inking job I did there. Just the line quality. I was experimenting with some techniques that I don't normally use. So again, this whole thing was like a bit of a learning exercise, a bit of a studying exercise. But then right there, I said, oh, you know what? I got to make some revisions. At some point, I thought I may make this my final artwork, but I decided not to since I more or less just traced it. And so, but then I wanted to get a little bit more precise. And I guess this would be, you could see how if, again, if I had to have this done in like an hour, this is what I would do. I don't think it's good. I wouldn't be proud of it, but it'd be like, oh my God, you need it that quick? Okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then make some adjustments. And one thing I noticed is he sort of has a light bulb shaped head. Like, I'm not exactly, and I'm not trying to be insulting, but it's with the way the beard works, it's almost like a peanut with the beard, where it's like a number 8 and a peanut, a sideways infinity sign, however you want to describe it. But under the beard, he's got his chin, so it kind of gives his skull a light bulb shape. And I don't think I included it in any of the in this drawing or my actual final drawing, but he has a cane he carries sometimes that has a skull on it, and the skull has a similar light bulb sort of shape. I don't know. Obviously, that's not on purpose, but it's just one of those interesting things. It's kind of like how people start to look like their pets. It's like his face starts to look like his walking cane. So while this video is about 22 minutes long total, again, this is about 3 hours of work, and that's not including, I probably spent 15, 20 minutes just looking him up and grabbing reference pictures, and that's after deciding that I wanted to go with the older version of himself as opposed to a middle-aged or a younger version. Although a younger version, because of his age, there's only a handful of pictures. That right there just said an hour and 20 minutes. So an hour and 20 minutes to get all these sketches together. Now, this is what I'm doing is I'm grabbing all the sketches I've done up to this point, and including the one that's traced. I only did one profile, and I'm saying, nope, that's the worst one. That one I traced, so it doesn't count. Those aren't that good. I like this one the best. Those two are okay. That's the one I like the best. Out of all of them, that sketch I felt was closest to what he looked like slash the look I was going for. Then I'm like, well, should I give him his glasses? Should I give him his cane? Maybe. I like his hat. So even though he didn't have his hat in this picture, I think my the likeness I got was best in this one, and the look, and kind of how there's the light bulb again. And this is the reference picture. So now I pull it back up, and I'm not tracing, but I am heavily referencing. But whether through style, design, failures of my own, even when I'm looking at the picture intensely and trying my best, this is my attempt at like realism. I'm going to make this as real as I can. I can't help but it comes out a little cartoony, a little caricature, a little comic booky, whatever you want to say. And I'm using heavy. I usually start with like a 19 or a 13 point pen with like heavy lines for outlines and the top of the eyelids and things like that. And then I'll do most of those lines, and then I'll go to a 9 and then a 5, and like I lower the size of the brush or pen as it goes. And then, so here again, I kind of roughed in the hat, but it didn't quite look right. So now I'm looking at the picture, and I'm trying to combine those two pictures in my mind. I guess I could have technically photoshopped them together, but I didn't want to do that because again, this is all an exercise, which I wanted to have a finished product at the end of it that is more than just my usual warm-up sketches. Because I could have, this right here could have been fine. That could have been my warm-up sketch. Boom, there you go, 15 minutes, whatever it took me. But I was trying to get to something else. And here I am again thinking, hey, do I want glasses? And the beard kind of flares out a little bit. And so I mostly pulled up this picture for the hat, but I did also I like the way his beard was a little bit more wispy and wild in this one as opposed to the other picture. So I incorporated that a little bit. The top of the hat, for whatever reason, I was having a hard time with. It was coming up bigger than it should be. And then I went back into inking and I moved his skull over. I realized that, oh, that's what it was. I realized I made the top of his skull a little bit too big. So I was sizing the hat to fit it rather. And so when I realized that that was the wrong size, then it was able to move the hat in. I also made a point of doing some heavy blacks and spotted blacks, which is something in my work I don't do enough and I want to do more. But when I'm working on a project or comic page, sometimes it's hard to think of stuff like that. But when I'm doing a single illustration and spending hours on it and trying to, think of all my deficiencies and work on them and practice, this is not a showcase of look how good I am. This is a showcase of look how much work this takes and look how frustrating, how many times I redraw it. And again, you'll see as I go. And the final product, what I get to, I'm happy with. I guess, for lack of a better term, proud of, but it's not what I wanted. It's not as good as I wanted. It's not as perfect as I wanted. And at some point, you just have to let go. And that's what they say. Art isn't finished. It's abandoned. And I think that's true whether you're doing a doodle on a napkin or a, $80 million movie or whatever. There comes a time when you either run out of money or time, or you just have to let it go. And that's one of the dangers of working for yourself. If theoretically there's no budget, because you're working for yourself and theoretically there's no time limit, you could work on the same thing forever and ever and ever and not get it done. And I've been victim to that and been victim to redrawing things 50,000 times. So sometimes it helps to have an internal deadline or tell yourself I'm only going to work on this till dinner time, or I'm giving myself an hour or a week or whatever it is, so that you actually have to be done at some point. Because in my opinion, and I think most artists agree, it's better to get 5 pieces done, paintings, comics, whatever, that are all like pretty good than one that is like perfect or maybe never comes out, more likely, because that one will never be perfect. And so you put 5 out that are, maybe in your opinion subpar or mediocre, but it's out there in the world and other people like it, more than you do, more often than not. And then the sixth one you do is going to be better than the fifth one, which is better than the fourth. So just by finishing them, you get better. So I could keep redrawing this 50 million times, but eventually I had to say, you know what, with the skill level I'm at, this is where I can get. And I could feel like, okay, this took me 3 hours. I feel like it's a correct, accurate representation of, an illustration of a person, a real person. If someone says, how good are you? I'm like, this is how good I am. In about 3 hours, I can get this close to what the person looks like in this style. Now, if I spent 10 hours, maybe I'd make it even look more realistic. I'd get crazier, change the angle, redraw it 15 times, scrap this completely, and I might show something that's better. Now, in my mind, I'm like, it'd be 5,000 times better, but in reality, it'd probably be like 10% better, 20% better. So it's not really worth all those extra hours to get that small percentage of improvement. But more importantly, it would be misrepresenting myself to a potential client or a fellow artist, because I'm not saying it's lying, because you can do it, but it's misrepresentation because if someone is going to pay me, let's say $50 an hour, like let's say, because the way they say to set your prices, and I don't always do this very well, is to figure out what you'd like to get paid an hour. So let's say I decide for this level of art, I should get paid $50 an hour. And so somebody says they want, this kind of style portrait or whatever of somebody. And I mean, I'm calling it a portrait even though it's not portrait style, but it's a portrait just because it's a person's face. So if I say I want $50 an hour, this took me about 3 hours, that's $150. If I told somebody I wanted $150 and I did it in 3 hours and they got this quality, they'd be happy, I'd be happy. But if this took me 10 hours or 20 hours and I said, yeah, give me $150, I would be miserable because either I'd give them a far inferior product to what they would expect because I didn't spend 20 hours on it, in which case they'd be annoyed, or I would spend the 20 hours on it and now I'm making like no money an hour and I'd be annoyed. So, you know, as much as you want to work on something forever and make it perfect, especially if you're going to be dealing with clients. If you're not, then you're only hurting yourself by not putting it out for anything out forever. And you notice I'm readjusting these eyes like a million times, and at some point I'm erasing lines on the face, and part of that is because I was using the other reference, and then when I cut back to this one, I realized some of what I did wasn't quite right, or at least not the way I wanted it to be. I was sort of losing the expression from this picture, which is more what I wanted. Um, but getting back to what I was saying is, if you present something as being, your average work when it's like your absolute best work that you labored over forever, you're doing everyone a disservice. Do those pieces every now and then that you labor over and learn from, but don't present it as your average work because it's setting up unrealistic expectations. Um, if you have a portfolio, you maybe put that at the front or something, but then the rest of the pages have to be kind of realistic. I mean, you can do it, but again, you're just setting yourself up for, staying up all night for not much money or giving them a product that is inferior to what you showed them previously. So this is something I struggle with a lot, not just with illustration, but with, I mean, it's all illustration, but comic books and, whatever. So I always try to find that middle ground of this is as good as I can do realistically. This is as good as I could do. I'm not cheaping out. I'm not, I always want to do my best, even for clients I don't like, even for projects I'm not interested. I always want to do my best because I don't want to cheat people. I want people to have a good experience and I want to represent myself well. I don't want to be embarrassed to show anything I've done. But there comes a limit where, okay, I'm getting paid $150. How many hours can I spend on this? And how many hours are worth putting in for the return I'm getting? I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but this is, again, everything I'm telling you is like, here's my advice because this is things I'm telling myself. And I think that's true of a lot of artists. The more things you stress, if someone's giving you advice about your art, the two main things you're going to hear is problems with your work that are easily and objectively fixable. If your perspective is terrible, they're going to be like, look, this is something you could fix. It's not an artistic decision. It's not what, here I go. I'm just going to erase everything and start all over again. Um, an easy like definitive direction they could point you in. Hey, you don't draw hands very well. Study hand anatomy. That's not an opinion. That's something that a clear point. And the other thing you'll hear a lot, the more subjective stuff. And again, this is in my experience and with me, is things that they themselves have trouble with or have struggled with. Oh, I see that you don't have enough value. Differentiation? That doesn't make sense. Enough variety of value. You've got a lot of gray, but not enough black, or there's no whites and everything's muddy, or something like that. That might be an objective thing to say, but it also might be because they struggle with it. It might be like, when you get done, flip it upside down and put some blacks in, or, you got to find time in a day to get things done, or you got to think about looking things from a different point of view, or, I'm giving kind of vague, bad examples, but the two main, advice I have been given and I have given from the average artist, there's always exceptions, obviously, is easy objective fixes. And that's easy with an asterisk. I don't mean it might take some studying, it might take buying some books or looking on the internet, it might take weeks, months, or even years to correct the problem, but easy in the sense that it's an objective thing that can be fixed and measured, and other people can weigh in on and objectively say if it's correct or not, and you can take definitive steps. There's like a how-to do it, which is not true in most of art. A lot of art is subjective and emotional, and what are you trying to do? But there are certain things, does this look like a car? Is the perspective correct? Is the anatomy correct? Things like that, which are the easy things to figure out because once you figure it out, that's when you make the creative decisions and you don't have to worry about that anymore. I think I'm almost to the point where I'm finally happy with the drawing. And you'll notice I kept messing with the eyes a lot because that was my favorite part of this expression. And I feel like I was really struggling with getting it. And this is, one of the things I'm talking about with likenesses is like at a glance, this looks like him. I see a million flaws why it doesn't look like him. But if I tell people who it is, the hat also actually helps, I think, because if people are familiar with him, and especially in his later years, he's taken to wearing this hat and cloak a lot, so it's more recognizable. But there are flaws, and I think I redrew the eye a few times and was like, you know what, it's got to be done. The other thing is it's funny because I like to work in black and white. Like my comic is in black and white with the exception of the cover. My comic, The Horror A4, in case you're unaware, it's a kaiju comic, giant monster Godzilla type thing, and but other than the cover, it's black and white because I like old black and white comics like Ninja Turtles and stuff like that. But I do find over the years I've gotten to be a decent colorist. It's not something I ever aspired to, but I've worked as a colorist and I've done work that just had to be colored. And a lot of people like color. And despite myself, I've gotten okay at it. I'm not saying I'm amazing, but I'm professional enough that people have paid me to do it, so I'm doing okay. Um, and I find that sometimes the color can save things. Just, I mean, inks can save bad pencils, colors can maybe save a bad thing. So since I'm doing every job, even if I'm not doing every job perfectly, if I do them all pretty good, the cumulative effect raises it up. And what I mean by that, right now it's just flat, and I still feel like I wasn't too thrilled with this. But once I start going in with the shadows, like immediately I'm like, oh, it starts looking nicer. And it also makes it look more stylized, where it doesn't necessarily make it look more accurate, but it makes it a better piece of, dare I say it, art. It looks more intentional. It starts looking more my style as opposed to just a collection of mistakes, which is arguably what style is. But I'm also coloring in a slightly different style. I've been practicing lately. I did a Wolverine picture the other day like this. If you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you would have seen it. I used to do straight up cell shading where I would just do a black with, like 50% opacity, and then I would do like different shades of that color, a darker shade and stuff. And I still kind of do that, but I've been experimenting more and more with less opacity and more just overlapping colors. So it's actually less blended than what you would think is good for comics and stuff, but I've been kind of liking the effect. And I've also been using colors, and this is, I think, where color theory comes in, although my color theory knowledge is terrible. But like I put some purple on him to get the shadows, and then I put a little bit of yellow in his beard, and here I am using brown. And instead of using black or just a shade of the color, I'm trying to mix in other colors that almost like in a painting way. And I'm not a painter, and I'm not trying to build myself up. I'm just explaining that I'm experimenting, and it's things you could experiment with too. Of instead of making the shadow black or dark, beige, make it orange or red or, purple or whatever. Or like what I did there is I actually did all three. I did a highlight, a low light, then I did some blush, then I did some purple, like there you can see it's literally purple. And sometimes I'll get them with the whole thing and then put like a green light, not on him, but if it was like a monster or something, you put just a green highlight from nowhere. Just like why not? It pops it out, it makes it look interesting, and it makes it look less like a photograph, which at one point that was something to aspire to, and there's nothing wrong if you want to do that. But photorealism in the age of the digital photograph on everyone's phone is a lot harder sell. And to me, I'm more about the drama and the story of it. And here I am just messing around with the background. So we're coming up to the end. This is The Amazing Randy. It took me 3 hours. I hope you like it. And even if you don't like it, you should check out the movie An Honest Liar. And good luck with all your art experiments. See ya.